the opening really was quite nice. I mean, it was packed in here for hours. And I had a number of students, none that I recognize here, come up to me and say, well, I was told that I had to go to an art show, so I just decided I'd go to this one. And then they stuck around, so they seemed to enjoy it. I've been making art, I drew all my life. I spent my time when I was very young, and I used to draw constantly. But I never took an art class because I was more interested in sports, and I played sports all through school and into college. And so art wasn't something that really seemed to align itself with my other interests. So it wasn't until I was in college that I had to take an art class. It was required, and Mary Harrington was taking sculpture, so I followed her in. And that was my first experience with an art class, and I found that I loved it. My association with art lasted much longer than my association with Mary Harrington. But it led to ceramics. Sculpture class led to ceramics, and then I decided that I was going to be a potter, and I did that for a few years and went to Indiana University for a graduate degree in ceramics, and then to University of Southern California for a graduate degree in sculpture, and then to George Washington University for a graduate degree in education, because what I found was I couldn't make a living making art. And I needed a job, and teaching was the best way to go, and it provided me with summers off. Well, so my degree from GW was in severely emotionally disturbed adolescents. So that's what I had been teaching for years. I got an opportunity to start an art program in PG County for kids who were emotionally disturbed, a lot of aggressive and violent behaviors and things of that sort. And it meant that we did a lot of restraints as well. And so when I turned about, when I got to be in my late 40s, about 50, I found that during the restraints I was hitting the ground first. This is not the way that you want to be spending your later years. Margaret had suggested to me at one point that I might want to come to Frederick County and teach art, and the thought was that I was going to come to the high school that Margaret was at, Linganore High School, and I was going to start a sculpture program. Well, by the time that all came together, she left. I got there, found that I was probably better suited to teaching kids who were emotionally disturbed than, I'd never had students listen to me before. And so I went into an art class, and I'm teaching art, and they're hanging on every word. And I thought, oh my God, I don't know what to tell them. So I went back to special ed, where I've been now for the last 5 years. And what that led to was we were doing various projects around town in Frederick. And one of the projects we were doing was we were painting stairwells of the Delaplane, which is the visual arts center in downtown Frederick. And we were painting them with the complementary colors. And so as we finished a section and the paint can would be emptied, I started looking at these empty paint cans. And then I started collecting them. And I collected about 825 paint cans. And they've now, they're not all in this show, obviously, but they've taken different forms. I had a show at a gallery in New York called Causey Contemporary, and I did a piece there that was about 500 paint cans on a wall. It wouldn't fit in any of the spaces around here, but it was about 17 or 18 feet long and about 10 feet tall and along the wall. And the closest to it looks similar to this in terms of presentation, where the color was all facing out. The cans were all against the wall. So this piece, the reason I'm starting here is because this is similar to the first ideas that I had about how to use the paint cans. After that, I started to think about, you're left with when you have 820 some paint cans to empty, you end up with a lot of paint can lids. So this piece over here, you guys are going to have to move around to see it, but this piece over here was a result of having all of these lids, and this piece is called The Colors of Our Lives because what you find when you're opening paint cans, and I went around, I collected paint cans from everyone. I put notices in people's mailbox. I asked friends, what did they have, and they gave me paint cans, and I ended up, most of them are whites or off-whites. You know, I mean, that's what most people are comfortable with. So when I would find a color, you know, in a paint can that was not white, I would save it and then pour that color into other cans so that I could have more of those. But, so the lids led to, you know, one after another, and they became like quilts. And so I started to see them as quilts, and then actually when I showed this up in New York, and a writer up there referred to them as tapestries, as metallic tapestries. So I stole them and then started calling them reclamation tapestries because I called this project Reclamation initially, and now it's Reclamation Variation. It's been in 3 different shows and 3 different incarnations because depending on what the space gives you determines sometimes how it is you present the work. So the piece that's behind you right there was initially going to be sort of the centerpiece of the show. It was going to be the installation that I was going to do for this space, and I was going to, you can see this this angle right here with the big window. My initial idea was to come in with, you know, hundreds of paint cans. I was going to mimic that shape. So I was going to line the paint cans up here and there, and then on that side of the wall it was going to be the inverse. So that it was going to be like a V cut out there, and the cans were going to go up from there. So we got in here on a while ago, started doing it, and it was, I don't know how many hours in, and stepped back, and it just stunk. You know, it's like you have this idea of how something's going to look and how it's going to work, and you're so sure that it's going to be great, and you come in and you execute it, and it's horrible. I mean, it was horrible. And so my friend who was with me and I both recognized this, and we sat down on the floor and thought, now what? You know, I mean, this was the idea. This was the big idea. And so we started taking stuff away from it and making shapes out of the cans that were on the wall. The only thing that's left from that is this shape. So I got so frustrated with it that I decided to leave it alone. Obviously, since this side failed, I couldn't do what I had planned for that side. So I had an opportunity then, and this is also the kind of thing that happens when you're doing an installation. I had an opportunity then to do a piece that was mostly whites and off-whites and muted colors and earth tones, and put that up. And then the idea of cutting the cans on the edge so I could square it up came to me. So I spent a fair amount of time doing that. As a matter of fact, I did it with a utility knife. And while I was here doing it, I sliced my leg because I cut through. And I went with more force than I knew, and I jagged my leg with the utility knife, which I kind of, and then bled through my pants, and I thought, boy, I should put those up. You know? Which actually, I got to tell you, this is a quick story. When I was in grad school at Indiana University, we were doing these body castings. You know, everybody was body castings, full body casts. You know, like the George Segal figures with the plaster gauze wrapped. And so we're in the studio, and we're doing the body cast, and we didn't really think it out, you know, so we wrapped me all the way around, completely, all the way around. We didn't do like halfway, and we did it kind of thick. So then, when it hurt, we had to get it off, and they said, well, you can cut it off with, you know, surgical scissors. right? That's not true. You can't. We had to cut it off with a utility knife. And I'm like this, and it's up to here, and I'm looking down, and my friend, do you know Tom Ashcraft? I've told you, Tom, a friend of mine teaches at he's the head of the sculpture department at George Mason. Anyway, we met in Indiana, and so he's working on the inside leg with a utility knife. And I'm like this, and I start to see red starting to bleed into the cast all the way down. He sliced the interior of my leg from right about here to right about here. And I gotta tell you, it hurt. You know, it hurt. And when we finally got the whole thing off, and it was in half, and I took it, and I nailed it, and it was beautiful. You know, that red on the inside of the white, like that, it was worth it. I'm not gonna do it again. And what I also learned was that when you do a cast, do half at a time. Don't do it all the way around. So if you're gonna work with plaster gauze, do half. But the other part that's great about that is if you want to remove body hair, that's a good way to do it. And yes, we use that as well. So anyway, so I did this piece because it was a piece that had been in my head, and this one failed. So I did that one, and then I put that one up, and that one actually was freestanding at one point, and in 2 different incarnations, and I wasn't liking it, so I put it against the wall and did it that way. And then I had Margaret come down, I don't know what night it was, one night last week, and I said, I just wanted confirmation about that. I said, this isn't working. You know, I don't remember what I said to you, but basically be honest, and you said it's, you know, terrible. Yeah, you know, it's crowded in, and that's one of the other things that, you know, as you're working, you know, it helps sometimes to have somebody you trust around you that will be honest with you, you know. And I've known, like I said, I've known Margaret for a long time, and I appreciate her criticism, and she was honest with me, and she said, well, there's too much, it's too much, you know. You couldn't, it's like you couldn't. It was so dense that you couldn't even walk through it, and especially with that there. So I took it all apart and decided I was going to start over. And I left that one section there. There was another section coming off the wall here, and I think did I start to make the line that night? And I made the line that night.
I mean, you solved it once you know.
Maybe.
It was part of this.
You know, and that's the other part is that you know, when you're doing something that you've never done, and you have a space to work in that you're not familiar with, you've got to be willing to fail. And I wasn't, but I accepted my failure and decided that, you know, I could either take everything off the wall and put something in front of it, you know, and play it safe, or I could try again. And I figured, well, I've got this opportunity, I'm going to try again. So I left that shape and then basically mimicked this line. This angle, this line, and that angle, they're the same as it comes down through across the wall. And it seemed to work better, you know, it seemed to work better than anything else. And I'm still not sure about it, but I'm comfortable with it. Yeah.
I like the light shot.
Well, that's always, yeah, thanks. That's always part of it, is that, you know, you can always play with the lights. I mean, you have individual things like this. The first time I started playing with the lights in these things is with the handles, and I was able to, you know, like do things with the handles draping down and having the lights cross through, and that looked kind of interesting. So I think that's the other element you have to consider when you're doing three-dimensional work, you know, and stuff coming off the walls, that you have light, and you can use it to your advantage, you know. And so those crisscrosses were one of the things that when I was lighting it, I was thinking about how can I make it, how can I give it added interest. Now, my poet friend Brash is I think around the back,